Welcome to the Resilience webinar series produced by the Educational Partnerships for Innovation in Communities Network, EPICN for short, and also produced by the US EPA Office of Research and Development. EPICN exists to unite the human capital of universities with local governments and communities, and to improve the quality of life and social wealth for all involved. This Resilience webinar series is designed to highlight partnerships, projects, outcomes, and impacts on local resilience that our members have had over the years. It's presented in part by the members of the EPIC Network, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, and the U.S Environmental Protection Agency. Today, we are here to highlight the City of Keokuk and the County of Keokuk and the Chamber of Keokuk as well, and their partnership with the University of Iowa's EPIC program called the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities, or IISC, which facilitated the relationship and the partnership. Today, I'm joined by Travis Kraus, the director of IISC and faculty at the University of Iowa, Shelley Oltman, director of the Keokuk Chamber of Commerce, Jerry Anthony, faculty advisor to the Keokuk Downtown Revitalization Project team, as well as faculty at the University of Iowa, and Nadia Voitemata, the University of Iowa 2020 graduate of the University of Iowa and a former Fulbright scholar. Welcome, everyone. Really glad that you're here. In the slides, you'll find their contact information, and we'll share those slides out with participants in the room today, as well as tie them to the recording description in the future when it's posted. I'd like to take a few minutes just to introduce myself and my co-moderator. I'm the program manager at EPICN. My name is Marshall Curry. I work to support our member programs, as well as support our board of directors here at EPICN. And it's my pleasure to get to work with folks like Travis and the folks on the call today to inspire and catalyze these really unique partnership projects. I'm joined today by Molly Jenkins, who will be co-moderating and asking some of the questions along the way. She is an ORISE participant at the US EPA, who is part of the team supporting EPICN in our MOU with the US EPA Office of Research and Development. I've asked her here today to start things off with just a brief summary of some of the work that the US EPA and EPICN have been doing over the last couple of years to highlight local resilience.
Thanks so much, Marshall. So as part of this community resilience project we're doing using our partnership with EPICN here at the EPA, we have been taking advantage of the wealth of information that EPICN has on different projects from around the country and mining that project information for information related to community resilience. I helped develop a novel framework that is based on the City Resilience Index, but also informed by EPA's Regional Resilience Toolkit, EPA's CRISI project, which also focuses on community resilience, and other federal resilience frameworks and data, to develop a framework that takes into account social, economic, government, and physical infrastructure in a holistic view of what a community's resilience could be made of. So we've developed a bunch of indicators, and then from those derived keywords, and then mined the database for which projects generated the most resilience hits. And so all of the projects that we've been doing this webinar series on have been selected because they generated a high number of hits, and it's important to look at and highlight the people behind the project and not just the number crunching data that generates those hits. So thank you so much for sharing your case study with us today. And we look forward to hearing more about the project.
Thank you, Molly. Today, our experts are going to be sharing about their partnership project that occurred during the 2019-2020 academic year for Keokuk, Iowa, and the University of Iowa courses, students, and faculty that participated. At the end of the presentation, we'll make sure you can learn more about how to get involved with similar initiatives in your community, as well as give you an opportunity to ask questions of our panelists. To begin, we're going to start with some lightning round questions. These are designed to get just kind of an understanding of who our panelists are and move us into the content. So the first question I'll pose to, we'll go Travis, then Nadia, then Shelley, then Jerry every time. and I'll remind you of that order if we forget. Travis, thinking about where you live, what's your current favorite place?
Okay, gotta unmute myself first. Great question. Thank you very much, Marshall. And first of all, just thanks for hosting this webinar and to the EPA for identifying this project. I'm really excited to be able to talk about it. So my favorite place is actually, I volunteer for a local arts nonprofit. And so I spend a lot of time there working with local artists. And so it's called Public Space One. And that's the thing I wrote about that you'd find on my profile for the EPIC-N webinar too, because it is kind of a convergence of a lot of individuals and community leaders gathering together to think about community development around this idea of arts and culture. So that's my pick.
Hi, I think my favorite place right now, and I have to say I'm currently in Angola, in Luanda, my hometown, and my favorite place is the Bay of Luanda. It's this beautiful place with amazing trails, and whenever I talk about this project, the Keokuk Plan, it automatically makes me think about Luanda Bay, and it's surrounded by beautiful historical monuments. And I think as a society, we started to appreciate the Bay of Luanda when COVID hit, because it was one of the hotspots of the city where everybody would go to run. It's where I run every day, where people would go just to get a breath of fresh air. So yeah, Bay of Luanda.
I can go. It's Shelly. I'm Shelly. Thank you for having us here today. I really appreciate it. So my favorite place is my backyard / the river. We have a house that overlooks the Mississippi River, and it's north of the largest dam on the Mississippi. So it's more like a lake. And so you can see the bend in the river up north. And I like to garden. So I like to sit in my backyard and then look over the river. And every morning looking out the window, walking down our stairs. But it's really about the river. I'm not by chance there, but I can always see it. So that's my favorite place here in Keokuk.
Marshall, thank you very much for helping us be here today. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity. You know, listening to Nadia and Shelly, I almost want to go to Luanda Bay and to Shelly's backyard. You put it very, very well. Well, my favorite space, physical space in Iowa City is the Pentacrest. It's almost it's kind of the geographic center of town. It's a very beautiful space with symmetric buildings. And there are beautiful views out of that place to the rest of the city, and beautiful views from the rest of the city to this place. So I really love this place a lot. Thank you.
What associations do you follow, or public or trade magazines are you currently associated with, or you follow, or you look to for best practice?
So as a planner, the American Planning Association definitely comes to mind as a organization that I follow. I subscribe, something that I recommend, and I get the newsletter a lot. It's one of those newsletters that I actually spend the time looking through is an organization called Next City, or a publication called Next City. And it really has a lot of fantastic information about social justice topics, and there's a lot of intersections with planning as well. Locally, I mentioned the Public Space One, so with my involvement with the arts, I always kind of pay attention to what's going on with the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs. The NEA is another one. And then I do a lot of work in kind of the sustainability world as well. So we have some organizations doing some quality work here in Iowa, like the Iowa Environmental Council, and even locally places like the Johnson Clean Energy District, trying to think about like, how do we start to advance clean energy goals locally, right? Which is where you can actually start to understand how you can, as an individual, make a difference. So there's a long list of things that I follow, but those are some of the ones that come to mind right now.
As for me, I think, well, I have to mention UN Habitat and NACTO. NACTO, because of designing guidelines for transportation planning, I like to keep up with that, right? Because I feel like it's always changing. The research is always improving and such. And UN Habitat, because it keeps me in touch with what most African countries are implementing. Right, it updates me on new projects, on new interventions, and best practices. Yeah, I think my list is also very long, but I'm gonna keep with those two. Yeah.
Before we move on, Shelly, Nadia, what's NACTO?
NACTO is, I got it from the website I got from Professor Steve Spears, which was one of our advisors, and it was one that he mentions several times. They have studies on transportation planning, sustainable planning, transportation planning. They also have design guidelines, and it was one of the websites that I used the most, I believe, to develop some of the tools and the renderings and images that we're going to talk about later on for this Keokuk plan. Yeah.
So I'm going to the two that I follow quite a bit is APA, obviously, along with Travis. But then right now, because it's the legislative session in the state of Iowa, I follow the legislature. That's something that I've been following very closely because a lot of that has to do with policy. So economic development organizations right now, Professional Developers of Iowa is the community and economic development organization here in the state. But Bill Tracker is my number one favorite right now. So we have 110 legislative day session, and it starts January and then goes through April. So, but then also there's several that I follow that I can't remember the names right now because I have them favorited and I just go to them. So thanks.
I had never expected anyone to answer Bill Tracker, but I'm so glad that you brought that up for folks who watch this and for future students who are coming in to the network, because it is such an important tool to know. So thank you.
I'm also a planner, so I track stuff from the APA very closely. But in my work and outside my work, I'm a housing guy. So I track lots of stuff put out by the Harvard MIT Joint Center for Housing Studies. They have webinars fairly frequently. They put out news flashes about things. And there are two other organizations that are focused on social justice, especially around housing, that I track quite a bit. One is the National Low Income Housing Coalition, and the other is the NCRC, which is a National Community Reinvestment Coalition. They put out lots of news flashes from time to time, wonderful synopses of major issues coming up in housing, social justice issues, racial justice issues. So I track them very, very closely.
Mark on, thank you. For those of you who are watching the recording or joining us, we really like to make sure we spend a little bit of time giving future students and current students, future graduates, different roadmaps to take to get into this work. And so we ask each of you to reflect briefly on your career path, again, trying to highlight some of the twists and turns, maybe not all of them, but some of them if you see fit.
Yeah, well, I would say that in community and economic development, you often find people that had different history and maybe did something different, and then they fell into this position. And usually if you make it past 3 years, you're a lifer. And so I grew up on a farm in rural Minnesota, just north of Iowa. And I spent my late teens and early 20s traveling Europe and started doing different kinds of jobs. And then decided that I needed to go, ended up deciding going home, and went home, spent sort of a year cutting trees down and doing prescribed burning for prairie restoration, which was a very good experience in the aspect of sometimes you just need to take a break and get back to nature. And so then I decided in that time that I wanted to go and get a planning degree at Iowa State University, and they had a sustainable agriculture dual degree program. So I ended up going down that path, and I enjoyed my studies and thought that I was going to go into international sort of work, and then ended up getting a position with extension in this shared position with the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm in a weird little shared position. I'm Iowa State University employee, but I'm also the Chamber of Commerce director in a small rural community of about 10,000. So I got the best of two worlds. I got to use my network at the larger state level. I get to explain, how it is to be a local person. So when my colleagues who go out and work with local people, they have a little bit of understanding of it. And then also I get to have the opportunity to bring those programs down here. But I never thought I would be here for more than 3 to 5 years. I told them that in the interview. Now it's been 8. So I will tell you that, your career path is something that often there's different, options that you can take, and you'll never know where you're going to end up. But from my perspective, if you're going to go do something, go do it and do it well. And then from there, you'll find different opportunities. And at certain point in time in life that you decide that, hey, it's the time to go take different opportunities. I think right now with the Great Resignation, you see a lot of people seeing those, making those decisions too, to able to see what they want to do. But I think that in this career path that I have, I don't know if it was so much as a very thought out one, but just taking the opportunities that came knocking. So.
Shelley, that sounded so fantastic. Maybe not thought out, but very exciting. So I'm really happy you had that path. Well, mine is much more traditional. Out of high school, I was very interested in designing places. So I went and got a bachelor's degree in architecture. And during my architecture program, I was fascinated by large scale stuff beyond the individual building. So I got a degree in planning, focused on physical planning, not so much in policy stuff, but more focused on designing large towns and townships and neighborhoods. And then I worked for about 5 years as a professional planner. And during that time, I was exposed to teaching as a visiting faculty member. And I fell in love with teaching. So I went back to grad school to get a PhD. And just before I finished my PhD, I got a job at the University of Iowa. And I love this job. It's fascinating to be able to explain things to students, see students get excited about concepts, and then students, when they finish, they will go out and change the world. It's really exciting to be at the front end of the journey and see the outcomes after that. So I love my work. In addition to, traditionally a faculty member does research and teaching and does some community service. For me, the community engagement stuff that I do outside of my work, 9-to-5 work in my office is pretty important. Fairly engaged with the community about 15, 16 years ago in my area of housing. I sensed this need for more funding for housing in Iowa City, Johnson County, where I live and work. So with one student and a couple of community partners, we, on a whim, created a trust fund, a new financial entity called the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County, and asked for some money from the state administration, got some money. We got this thing going, and over the last 15 years now, we've given out $11 million that have helped build about 1,000 new affordable housing units. So that's really very, very satisfying. So I love what I do.
I studied architecture like Professor Jerry, but other than that, this is where I have to cross the line. So I studied architecture for 5 years, and a year after I took a gap year, I didn't travel. I just wanted to reconnect again with my family and all that. Well, I did travel anyway. Yeah, so I took a gap year, and following that, I applied for and got a Fulbright scholarship, which led me to the University of Iowa. And funny thing was, while I was filling out the form, they asked me to describe the type of program that I wanted to be a part of. And the University of Iowa, the School of Urban and Finance Public Affairs, matched 100% with what I described. It was literally what I wanted to do. The project that we're going to talk about later on matched everything that I wanted to do. And this is so exciting, really. And after that, so I went to Iowa and moved to the United States, which was an adventure, right? And 2 years after that, I graduated and I came back to my country and I applied for another scholarship because I decided to pursue a PhD degree. So if you want tips on applying for scholarships, I think I can give you 1 or 2. So I want to do that now. And I don't know the future. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm liking the academia so far. I like to be in school. I like to study. I like to learn. And research is a new passion that I'm going to pursue. Yeah.
Well, I have, I think, an interesting path like Shelley too, that's maybe probably non-traditional. So I actually came to the University of Iowa for my undergrad as well. So Iowa City, I've been in Iowa City for a really long time. I'm one of those people that walk around downtown and everybody's like, that person's been here forever. And so I came here and I was going to be a high school English teacher. That's what I got my undergrad degree in. But as an undergrad college student, my college job that I had to, pay my rent and buy my groceries and stuff, ended up through a series of very strange circumstances becoming an opportunity for me to be a small business owner in Iowa City. And being a small business owner is an education by itself. That's where I think that is where I got a lot of the training that I still apply today, because when you don't have the resources to have a whole bunch of people doing the work, you have to figure a lot of stuff out. And so that's kind of shaped the way I think that I do my work still, is that I think it made me kind of resourceful, and I can go figure out solutions to issues that I might not have understood really well. But after a certain period of time, well, there was one really kind of interesting moment before I decided to go back to grad school, where I was really involved in films that were happening in Iowa. So I have kind of a film background. I was in production and making my own films and stuff like that. So that was a wild couple of years for me. But that had to come to an end at some point. It wasn't necessarily the best lifestyle for somebody that has a family and kids at home. And I decided to go back to grad school just for my own personal development. I had a successful business, but I just felt like I was interested in education. And it kind of fell between something related to sustainability or film school. And my wife helped me decide that I should probably do something that there was a job waiting for me at the end. And so their School of Urban, it was called the School of Urban Regional Planning. Now it's called the School of Planning and Public Affairs. Also, like Nadia mentioned, checked a lot of the boxes for the types of things that I want to do, including public service. Like that was also in addition to the idea of sustainability and all of those things, I wanted to do something that was kind of public facing, and there was a service component of it as well. After grad school, I did regional planning, and unlike Shelley, my first kind of planning jobs were kind of short. I didn't stick around 8 years, so I did regional planning, and then I was in economic development, and that's where I got to know Shelley really well, actually. So I ran a chamber like Shelley and an economic development organization for a town in Iowa. And then ended up coming back to the university to run this program, Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities. And so I really think that all of those experiences they all really apply in many ways to the work that I'm doing, including understanding like how communities across Iowa work, as now the person that's kind of the liaison between communities and the University of Iowa and the academic world. And so finally, the last little piece of this story is I'm not only the director of IISC, but I've joined the faculty for planning and public affairs. And it was to some degree like a technical solution to try to figure out like how to form my position. But also I feel like, like having done the work does make me capable, I think, of teaching others to become practitioners themselves. But I still sit in faculty meetings with people like Jerry and just think, wow, I'm surrounded by a lot of really a lot of people with a lot of expertise, and honored to be part of that group.
Thanks, Travis. I appreciate it. And thank you all for sharing that. Your positionality and understanding it is really helpful to everyone. So thank you. Moving on to the meat and potatoes, or the corn, to use the Iowa reference of our presentation. Let's get into what it is that you all were brought together around, and that is the program at Iowa, IISC. And I'd like to start with Travis. Could you describe this program for us and what it does?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that that you recognize that we're the corn state and not the potato state. That's Idaho. People do confuse those two things. So well done. As a West Coaster, you got your geography down. So if you want to just go ahead and actually go to the next slide, the first thing that I wanted to talk about is actually really just about where we're at, right? So maybe people are not super familiar with Iowa, and there is, believe it or not, more than cornfields in Iowa. And Iowa City is what I think of as kind of an oasis within. We are surrounded by a lot of corn, but there's this really special place, Iowa City, and our campus, that, as Jerry was describing, is also, we have a beautiful campus. And something that's very unique about Iowa City and the University of Iowa is that the campus and community are really integrated. So there are campus buildings throughout the community. Downtown is kind of an extension of our campus. We have a pedestrian mall, and so they're really closely integrated. We have some of these photos that you see here. We have the old Capitol building, which is, at least in the Midwest, is very recognizable and iconic. The Iowa River passes through campus. Another thing that's interesting is that we have a renowned University of Iowa hospitals and clinics, and the picture that you see there that's in the middle with the yellow shirts, people may be familiar with a tradition that started a few years ago at Iowa Hawkeye football games where after the first quarter, the entire stadium turns and waves to the children's hospital. And so there are sick kids standing at the windows and they get a wave back, and it's kind of a special moment. And just another example of how our campus is so integrated with all these community things. So there's the football stadium and the hospital right next to each other, which I don't think you'd be able to find in many other places. Iowa City is also was the third UNESCO City of Literature. So we have a very famous program called the Iowa Writers Workshop, and we get a lot of really famous writers coming through our community, both earlier in their careers, but also teaching here as well. We are the first in the nation caucus, so we get a lot of attention from presidential candidates. And you can see here Barack Obama. This was, I think, probably during his first campaign, stopped at our famous bookstore, Prairie Lights. And then we just have a lot of art happening, arts and culture. So that's what that bottom photo is supposed to represent. So it's a really vibrant community and a really great place to live. So next slide. So now a little less well known than the Iowa Writers Workshop and the wave at the football games is the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities. And this is the program that I run, and I've been doing this for about 6 years now. Our program's been around since 2009, really. And our model is really closely aligned with the EPIC model, actually. And I would say probably around 2011 is when we kind of transitioned to do something that really fits with EPIC in terms of the city-year partnership, and also bringing together disciplines from across campus. So it started in the School of Urban and Regional Planning, and then for a couple of years that was housed there, but quickly we realized that there was a lot of interest and need to reach across campus to help communities address the challenges and opportunities that they were describing to us. So now we've grown so that we overall, over the course of our history, we've worked with 23 campus departments while still being in the School of Planning and Public Affairs. Each year there's around, probably 200 might be a little bit of an outdated number because we keep adding more classes and more departments. So, but 200 plus students each year. In our 12-year history, we've completed 316 projects, and we're kind of ticked that up to be doing about 30 to 40 projects every year. And we followed the city year model where we partner with 1 or 2 communities each year, and they get a lot of attention and resources, and we bring together a lot of people from across campus to co-create with communities. And that usually turns into about 15 to 20 projects. Overall, we've had what we call 16 of these full IISE partnerships, but another way that communities can work with us is just if they have one challenge they're trying to tackle and it fits with one project or one course, then we do that as well. So that's what you see on this map of Iowa here. The stars are our partners, and we serve the entire state. So Iowa City is kind of in the eastern central region, but we have gone 5 hours away to the west side of our state. Sioux City, Iowa is an example of that. And so we're really thinking about how do we serve communities throughout the entire state. One of those community partners was Keokuk, Iowa in 2009, and they would have been the star in the very bottom southeast corner. Yeah, that's Keokuk right down there. So yeah, so go ahead to the next slide. And so in that partnership was 2019 to 2020, and this is the partnership that Nadia was part of as well. And Shelley was what we call our community coordinator. So she and I met every week to talk about all of the projects that we were doing and how to manage all of those things. In Keokuk, we did 22 projects. We had 177 students participate. And another number that we probably underestimate is the number of hours that students contribute to this work. 10,000 is probably low. It's probably closer to 20,000, honestly. But it's just a lot of energy going to a single place with the idea that we can have a transformative effect when we work together and bring a lot of resources to the table. Next slide, please. And then finally, another, just wanted to share some photos of our students in Keokuk. So you can actually see Shelley in the bottom right there pointing up to something. I think we were talking about upper story housing, but this is a key piece of the work that we do, is to have communities go experience these places, to have firsthand knowledge, so that they have a better understanding of who they're serving, the work that they're doing, and it really enhances the quality of the work at the end. And that is my last slide. Thank you. Oh, you know what? Could I say one more quick thing too?
Yeah, and I'd like to bring Shelley in too. But go ahead, Travis. Say your last thing. And
one more quick thing that I want to acknowledge is that it's really interesting that the EPA found, and I'm really grateful to the EPA for bringing us together to talk about this project. This is one of the things that we don't make time for because we're always kind of moving ahead. But to be able to gather together and have Shelley and Nadia and Jerry I mean, we don't do this enough, and it's actually quite fun to be able to go back and look at the work that we've done together. So the other thing that's really interesting about one of the projects that we're going to talk about is that it's not surprising that the EPA identified this one, because we used EPA resources, including one called the Framework for Creating a Smart Growth Economic Development Strategy, a tool for small cities and towns. So that was kind of cool to hear from EPA, because we used resources while we were working in Keokuk that came directly from the EPA.
Thanks, Travis. And so, Shelley, I'm curious. Travis kind of started to describe your role in general, what you did for the project. But while this slide is up and there's pictures of you actually fulfilling that role, I was wondering if you could talk about, like, why did you even get interested in IISC to begin with, and what were you prepared to do?
So I'll just give you a little bit of information about Keokuk too. So you saw that it's in the southeast corner of the southeast corner. You go over one bridge, you're in Illinois. You go over the other bridge, you're in Missouri. So we are down here in the corner. And so when you look at also just the history of Keokuk, you saw the picture with the students underneath the statue. That is our namesake, Chief Keokuk. Chief Keokuk. He is a Sac Fax chief, and actually, sadly, that statue is a misrepresentation of their culture. They would not wear the eagle feathers headdress, but they would have one feather. There's a very nice picture in the Smithsonian of him and his father, I believe it is. But that's the traditional lands of the Fox-Sac tribe is here in Keokuk, and you can go around and actually find some of the historical artifacts. I know some people that have some amazing arrowhead collections and things like that. But when you look at the establishment of the state of Iowa, it started in Keokuk. And so we were a stop on the river because there was 45 miles of rapids north of us. And then so we were, with that being said, we were a main place for the North when it came down to the Civil War. They brought most of their soldiers up to where we were. We had 5 Civil War hospitals. We have the National Cemetery that was established the same day as Arlington by President Lincoln. And so you look at the community of Keokuk at the turn of the century, 1900s, we had the highest per capita millionaires in the United States. It was a very rich, very influential community at that time and had a lot of money and innovation. They built the first and largest and only hydroelectric dam on the Mississippi to this day. And so Keokuk was at one point a Chicago. And instead of blowing up into a Chicago, Keokuk has stayed a smaller community. We had our highest population at about 16,000, 17,000 in the 1960s. And since then, we have lost a significant portion of our population, like many rural communities. So now we are a community of about 9,900 this last census. And so with that comes some very difficult things that we have to deal with. It's a beautiful community. They have all these beautiful mansions, but with that comes the cost to upkeep those things. And so the reason that we went to Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities, and I gave Travis a call and said, hey, I saw this, like, can Keokuk apply? And he's like, yes, please. Is that we actually had just hired a new city administrator. We had never had a city administrator. We were operated by a mayor and 9 city council members. And so we decided to hire a city administrator. That city administrator said, we haven't done a comprehensive plan since 1998. And so in 2018, we completed an award-winning comprehensive plan. And that has been the roadmap for us to be able to put our application together and to identify what the projects were for the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities. I think we put 25 to 30 different projects in the application, and every single one of them had some sort of mention in the comprehensive plan. And so that was our foundational document. And so we took that, and then from there, we worked with Travis at identifying what exact projects could we work with. But one of the key things for me as putting this application in, I had to make sure I reached out to every single community partner and explain to them, this is what the idea is behind this. This is what this can look like. Are you willing to do the work? Because it's not my job to do the work on your behalf. I'm bringing you the opportunity. I'm going to explain to you and help you and coordinate this and facilitate this, but this is your work and this is your opportunity. And so with that being said, you have questions, I'm here to help, but I'm not going to be doing the work on your behalf. And so it was really important to get that buy-in from the community organizations before that application was ever even submitted, and to make sure that they were understanding that if we are accepted, that this is what we're going to be doing. And so that took a lot of time. It's all about phone calls and relationship building. From my perspective as a community partner, I didn't want to just say, hey, you know, the library, they want to do a project, I'll put something in for them. No, I sat down with them and said specifically, what are you looking to do? I can't say exactly what it's going to look like, but are you interested in the opportunity? And then through that, after the application was accepted, then we whittled down what exactly was going to happen and the details and what that would look like. But to me, from my perspective, is it was an opportunity for us to be able to move forward on the implementation of a very well thought out comprehensive plan. And then from there, it was just, you know, let's have them do some of that foundational work, and we just keep on building and building and building. So that's, from my perspective, if you're a community partner, really you need to get that buy-in from the get-go from all the organizations, because you don't want to be the one that's coordinating 22 projects. And I think we did 2 other projects on top of that actually too. One with the city, with the water, and another one with the library. So, but that's how it was from my perspective and my experience.
Thank you. And so Jerry, from your perspective, I think you've done some projects like this in your past before Keokuk came to you, but I'm curious, what was it like being introduced to this city, and what were you preparing to do as a faculty member?
A great question, Marshall. Yes, you're right. I have had some past experience in such kind of projects. But before I respond to that, could I just add on to Travis's responses, if it's okay? So could you go back to the first 2 slides that Travis had?
Of course.
And I'll just speak just a minute on that, and then I'll kind of respond to your question prompt, if it's okay. Yeah, that slide. So Travis mentioned how Iowa City is a great place, and I just want to add to that. People think that this is a small city in the middle of lots of cornfields, but it's a small city packed with lots of action. For example, in the bottom left slide, by the river, yeah, it's a beautiful river, and the building on the right is a Frank Gehry building. Frank Gehry is one of the leading architects in the world, and that building is designed by him. So we have a collection of these buildings across campus, designed by some of the leading designers of the world that we in Iowa City on campus are really proud of. Travis mentioned the Iowa Writers Workshop. The Iowa Writers Workshop is, I don't know, probably close to 100 years old. And it's the oldest writing program in the country. So almost, many, many famous writers, Nobel Prize winners have had an association with the Iowa Writers Workshop. It has a writing program. I think it's a master's program, master's in creative writing, where people come to become a creative writer. But the competition to get in is so intense, you almost have to be a published author to get in to publish a book. Okay, so it's So Travis also mentioned that this is the third UNESCO World City of Literature and first in the US. First in the US. And I mentioned that because creativity and innovation is almost in the air here. So, you know, and IISC is able to tap into that. There is creativity, not just in the planning school, there's creativity in the arts program, in the art and art history program, there's creativity in the journalism program. And so IISC is able to bring this creativity and knowledge from these diverse fields for the benefit of communities across the state. And that's absolutely amazing. So for Travis and faculty like me involved with this project, we like working with those communities, but we also like the outcomes from those projects. In Keokuk, we finished the project like a couple of years ago, and the outcomes are shaping up. And, you know, we'd like to go back 5 years from now and see what happened in the community. But the outcomes are shaping up, especially guided by a dynamic leader like Shelley. We need those people in our communities. So it's a partnership between the faculty, Travis, and the leaders there. So this is really exciting work that IISC does. Now about Keokuk, as an architect and urban planner, you know, I see many, many small towns across the country, including in Iowa, that once were very, very great places. As Shelley mentioned that Keokuk once had the highest per capita millionaires, I didn't know that. But when you walk through the city, drive through the city, you can see evidence of its glorious past. You see these big mansions, you see these beautiful buildings that were built about 100 years ago. And there are many, many towns in Iowa, many, many towns in the Midwest that have that. But because of how the economy has restructured and moved away, they are not necessarily thriving as they should be. So when Keokuk was picked, a place with so much of history, with so much of built character, so many beautiful buildings, I was absolutely excited to be part of that project. I was really glad the path the students took in identifying the downtown and trying to revitalize the downtown. And the product that they came up with, I'm pretty optimistic with Shelley's leadership there that 4 or 5 years from now, that project would be a watershed moment in the city's history and how the city has turned around under her leadership using the documents that the students produced. So very excited about what has happened already and what's going to come.
Thank you so much for your responses and your highlight of more of the Iowa context. It really helps paint a picture. Nadia, I'm going to turn to you now because we've talked to the faculty and the community partner, but the student experience is super important for us to highlight as well. And I know you weren't a student in Jerry's course for this, but you were a part of a different course or maybe a different project than what Jerry's was. So we'll talk more about that. But as you were being faced with this project, you already highlighted in your intro that this is really connected to the kind of work you wanted to do as a student. But I was wondering what it was like being introduced to the idea of partnering with Keokuk and just like what the student experience within the work is like.
Right. It was very scary at first. I know it was something that I described in my Fulbright application that I wanted to do, but God, I was very naive. It was extremely scary. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to talk to community members and I'm going to talk to community leaders and actors like Shelley, people who know what they're talking about. And God, I'm only a student. What do I know, right? And this was actually the first time that I was ever involved in a project of such magnitude, right? And of that much responsibility, because this is something that the community hopes that is going to be implemented. So it's not just something that you write and you put it up on the shelf, right? It's something that's going to be implemented in the future. So there's a lot of responsibility there. But knowing that I was part of a team, I was working with 4 other students, and I think I can talk about that later, but that was important. And also knowing that we have the IISC with us, right? That was the amazing part, someone that was mediating the conversation between us and the community, right? It wasn't just, oh, let's talk to the students. It was actually the IISC in front of us and mediating that conversation and making sure that communication was going smoothly between both sides. Whenever we had a question, whenever we had doubts or we wanted to implement something or we thought we were moving away from the project, the IISC came up and he said, hey, actually, this is what the community want. No, this is what the community want. And then we had Shelley, who introduced us to Keokuk. Again, I moved from my country to the United States straight to Iowa. So I never heard of city of Keokuk, right? And in that first visit to the city, as you could see from the pictures, Shelley was all like full happiness, like, this is my town. So I immediately fell in love with the city. Like, I wasn't even living there. I knew no one there, but just that introduction to the community, just that introduction to what they wanted to do and how much they wanted to change and improve their lives, like really helped me immerse myself into the project. And that was amazing. So knowing that I had those people behind me and alongside me, and our advisors and students and team members and all that, kind of made me fearless. I was like, guys, this is it. We can do this. Yeah. So it was really good. Yeah, it was a nice experience. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Michelle, can I respond to that just for a second to move on? I think this is, I think this speaks to the value of these partners. There's so many things that Nadia mentioned that we could, talk a lot about. But one of those is that students bring a lot of creativity and innovative ideas, but they also bring kind of like this element of risk tolerance too, and the fearlessness. And but when we can work through a program where that there's some structure and all of those things, some people really open up to students, and some people say, students, like, I'm busy, and I don't want to answer an email from a student. And so when you can kind of bring these things together, then I think you can start, like opening a lot of doors that might have been closed previously. And then especially with Nadia, but another thing that we see happening is that it just kind of taps into the innate leadership capabilities of our students, right? So Nadia is a great example of somebody that, like, just coming to Iowa for the first time, you could just kind of see the personal growth over a 2-year period, and so that was really fun to witness as well.
Thanks, Travis. I'm going to kind of combine some of our next talking points a little bit here, and I'd like Shelley and Jerry to talk about the project that they coordinated on, which I believe is this one, if I have it right in the slides. So I think, Shelley, why don't you start kind of what's this project about? I know it's one of 22 that you completed, but I'm hoping you could get us going on this one.
So that's another thing that I would tell people is that yes, there's 22 projects, but many of them overlapped. So that was the thing that had a really big impact from our perspective is that the ability to take these projects and say, hey, the planning students can do a whole big downtown revitalization project like this. And then I had engineering students within that neighborhood that did structural analysis of some historic buildings. I had another group that did a riverfront connection project that were engineers. So, I mean, that was the way that I looked at it I was like, okay, so there's 22 projects, but they're all touching each other in some way, hopefully cohesively in a certain aspect, to make this all move forward. So you can see the grandiose buildings that Jerry had talked about, that Keokuk has a very large Main Street. We have 14 Main Street districts. So the state of Iowa has a national renowned Main Street program. Keokuk was one of the original 5 communities, and our Main Street district is 14 blocks. So from 2nd to 14th Street, and then a block and a half on both sides. And all the pictures that you see here are actually within the Main Street district, or just bordering right on it. And so we have a state highway that runs through this downtown, the downtown Keokuk, but this portion of the project that they did with the students is just a small portion of the area that is much more residential and is really sort of I like to think of it as like a downtown area. But you can go on to the next slide here. And so one of the biggest things that they did and they started out with is that we needed to have an assessment of the actual this area that we had selected. So the students went out and identified vacant properties. We're looking at it from a perspective in Keokuk is that we most likely as a community are not going to be able to annex or build in greenfield development because of the barriers related to the cost of that kind of construction. So we really wanted to look at how do we reinvest in our existing neighborhoods and our existing community. And so the students went out and they did a vacant property. They went out and just did a windshield survey, I think, Jerry, and then also used some different data to be able to layer that to identify some of those vacant properties. And one of the outcomes that I won't talk about in depth right now, several of these vacant properties we have identified and have actually applied for funding to be able to do infill development on them for residential. And so you can go to the next slide. And then the Catalyst site overview. So there were several sites that were selected because the city actually has owned, there's a program in the state of Iowa, it's called 657A. And what this program is, it's actually a code in the Iowa code, is that the city, if a property meets 11 different standards of abandonment, derelict, nuisance, things like that, that property, the city can go after it to be able to take that property, and then it will wipe all the liens off of it to be clean. One of the biggest struggles that we've had in a community is that a lot of these people would say, hey, I'll just give you the property. Well, we don't want the property because it has $30,000 of liens on it. And I'll tell you right now, we're dealing with a property like that. And it comes off May 22nd, 10 years worth of liens that we didn't know about until we pulled the title and already had a foundation on a building board. So, I mean, so there's things like this where you're like, okay, so you see these Catalyst sites, the city has owned these properties. They were taken in a manner because they were a nuisance property. So they're clean properties for us to move forward with. This is not what the city wants to do. The city doesn't want to own property, to be honest. They want to be able to turn these around and get these in other people's hands. And so if you move on to the next slide, this is a property that the city actually had to tear down 4 buildings to be able to get these properties, and they were large buildings, and it was probably a cost over probably about $500,000 to tear all these buildings down with the dumping fees and all that. But they were in such a condition that they were going to fall, or we were going to have to tear them down, sadly. But this is in a prime location in downtown Keokuk, where there's several different investments already. It borders up against the Grand Theater. There's a whole city block that's going to be turned into a sort of arts and sculpture park, actually. I just talked to the gentleman today, and they got the money, and they're getting the contracts all figured out to get it started this spring. But the students put the idea to put in a community garden and playground in this space. We actually have identified it as also a possible infill development for housing. At this point in time, we haven't moved forward with the community garden in this exact location. However, there's a lot of conversations happening around this and what this could actually look like. If you move on to the next property. So this is the project that I am most excited about and we've had the most positive outcomes moving forward. And we have to remember this, the students finished their projects in the spring of 2020. And so I have to commend the professors and the faculty and the students for powering through. From March 15th was the day that pretty much everything shut down in the state of Iowa until the end of May. And so what this project is, there's 3 city-owned buildings here. You can see the 3 on the left-hand side are all city-owned. There was a fire in the building on the left-hand side, and then the other 2 buildings are in poor condition. As you can see, they've been boarded up. They're just not in the greatest condition. Ursula put together this rendering, and she even put individuals from our community in it, so the individuals can see themselves experiencing this. We just recently applied for a $600,000 upper story grant to be able to put 10 apartments in the upper stories. Those apartments, actually, we had engineering students that had put all those numbers together. We just had an architect take those numbers and relook at them because of the increased cost of construction. We used that actual for our application, and this as well, with these renderings so they can see what it could look like. And then the city has designated $200,000 in ARPA funds, and we applied for a Catalyst grant of $100,000. So nearly $1 million to be able to move forward on a $2.3 million project. And we have 2 local developers that are extremely interested. So we're going to be working on that over the next few weeks. And then, do you want to talk about this one, Jerry?
Well, I'll maybe briefly talk about the process of what you've gone through here, okay, rather than the specific site.
Yes.
what the students went through. So, you know, in places like Keokuk, there is this historic architecture that is there, but there are also lots of vacant parcels and vacant buildings. And the students developed an inventory of vacant lands and established what is the ownership, who owns what. And that's a great tool for decision making. And then the more important one was to identify vacant buildings, because sometimes buildings can be standing and it might seem that there's something going on, but there's nothing going on. And the building has been left vacant by the previous owner occupant and is just, you know, withering on the vine. And so the process of identifying which buildings were actually in use and which buildings had been vacant was a very complicated process. Looking at water meters and water bills and all of that and putting it all together was a fantastic exercise. And then once that had been done, the students said, well, let's identify certain places within the downtown area where if there's some kind of intervention, that intervention would catalyze development around the entire area, maybe the surrounding properties and beyond. So using that logic, they identified a few catalyst sites. I think there were 6 catalyst sites, maybe 8, I don't remember at this point. And these are the ones that Shelley's highlighting. So the hope is the city comes in and enables private parties to do some projects at these catalyst sites. And the students hope that this, the work on the catalyst sites would spur more development around the catalyst sites and revive downtown as a whole. Some of these catalyst sites were owned by the city, as Shelley mentioned, but some were not. But with the guidance provided by the students of the project, it provides a great amount of information base for the city to choose, prioritize and choose and move ahead, and provides information for developers as well. So it's really a market signal for developers that the city is serious, especially when the city is putting its own money, it's putting its own skin in the game. It signals to the developers that the city cares about downtown, and so should you. And so that's a very positive thing for a city.
This was just a simple redesign of a parking lot that's existing. We haven't moved on this yet, but there are some other options that we've looked at for open air cinema according to the vacant property account that was put together by the students. I think we can move on to the Pathways project, and Nadia can talk a little bit more about this. So Keokuk, I do want to preface this with the EPA. So like Keokuk is under an EPA decree to be able to do sewer separation. This sewer separation is, to be honest, bankrupting us. I know that they have their job to do, but it is. We have a $70 million tunnel that we have to dig underneath Rand Park, and we don't have the money. And so part of this project was to look at creative ways as to how do we take what our these other creative ways to look at how can we take some of that load off of our sewer separation and our stormwater. So I would let Nadia talk more about this in detail.
Thank you, Shelley. Well, I really couldn't start talking about the project without mentioning the other 4 students that were involved in this, and namely it's Nate Bauer, Nelson Lauren, Hannah Neal, and Joseph Walensky. They were a major part of all of this. And again, the beauty of this project was to work with people with different backgrounds and different interests, and we were able to pull this plan and project together, which was amazing. Varsha, you can go to the next slide, please. So as Shelley was saying, the Keokuk has a comprehensive plan of 2018, and it was used we were able to align the Keokuk Pathway and Green Streets plan with the comprehensive plan by aligning our principles and goals pertaining lifestyle amenities and resilient infrastructure to the pathways and the Green Street plans. So here we have the network plan that we developed, right? And the goal of the plan overall was to increase safety and connectivity to community assets, schools, parks, major employees, multifamily dwelling units, and other popular destinations that we were able to identify with the help of the community. And we did that. We developed the pathway network that included treatment options and phases that we're going to talk about later on, priority of implementations. Here we recommended treatments for the network plan, which was informed by the community places, again, as I mentioned, and it was adapted by the state's guidelines for bicycles and pedestrian infrastructure. The selected treatments include share lanes, as you can see, bicycle conventional lanes, multi-use trails, bike boulevards, and buffered lanes. Again, the lines that are dotted, are dashed, are the ones that are optional, and the continuous lines are the ones that we were proposing. And again, we got to this plan with the help of the community, with the community engagement events that we hosted with help of Shelley and the IISC. And we were able to see, okay, by the width and circuit of the streets, which treatment was most suitable, again, in connection with the state guidelines for the city based on traffic volumes and surrounding and street conditions. Next slide, please. Thank you, Marshall. So in order to prioritize the project, funding, allocations, and address immediate concerns for walking and biking, we decided to divide the proposed network into 3 phases. So phase 1 includes priority connections in the city of Keokuk, and that was along Main Street and some downtown roads with high traffic volumes. Phase 2 pertains to the places in between phase 1 and phase 3. I promise it will make sense. These are the spots with low traffic volumes and requires less intensive treatments. And phase 3 includes recreational travel, recreational trails along places in this phase are not meant to address immediate safety concerns, but actually recreational ones that we are proposing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the other goal of this plan was to address stormwater runoff in a cost-effective manner, right? That would reduce infrastructure costs, help beautify the streets, and increase recreational opportunities in the city. So one option considered is Green Street. So Green Street is a full or a partial conversion of the road to green infrastructure to reduce the impact of stormwater management and enhance the user experience, right? So to help guide the green streets, the group developed the decision matrix that would analyze street segments based on characteristics, namely traffic volume, street conditions, proximity to popular destinations, and flooding as well, obviously, that would later on be scored and ranked in different treatment options for each location. Those were the ones that the city or community leaders would rank based on priority and such. So the implemented proposed for pathways and green streets prioritize cost-effective options that are effective, that also require minimal physical interventions and reduce maintenance in the long run. So next slide, I think it would be better to show. So the group decided to go with a different perspective, right? So instead of having big chunks of paragraphs in writing explaining what the community should do or recommending what the community could implement, well, we ended up doing that, but we also decided to show rather than tell, right? That really knocks things off the park. So we developed rendering images to kind of show the community how the city would look like if they decided to implement the suggestions and recommendations that we were suggesting, right? Next slide, please. So this is the same image, but with the implementation recommendation implemented, excuse me. And this includes markings on the street and bike lanes on both sides and crosswalking, right? Next slide, please. this is another chunk that where we use the decision matrix, and is well explained in the plan, to kind of showcase, hey, this is the conditions that you have. And the other slide shows, Marcia, you can go ahead and show the other slide, shows what can the street look like. And in this one, thank you, Marshall. Yeah, so in this slide, in this example, this rendering of Green Street conversion, we have Green Street infrastructure, permeable road surface, which is not new to the Keokuk community. We found several chunks of streets in the community had that type of permeable surface. And next slide, please. We can go on. Next slide, Marshall.
It's on my end. I think it's just a little laggy. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, it's fine. This was another street where we based on the decision matrix and the feedback that we got from the community, we were able to implement both examples of what we were trying to achieve, right? We were able to add tree swales right in the corner, and we were also able to mark places for bike lanes. We were able to mark division between both lanes. So this is a great example of implementations that would go well with pathways and greenways. Travis, is there anything I'm missing that you would like to add?
Nadia, I think that was very thorough. So
really? Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that and kind of the underlining thing is that for both of these projects is that we are helping with a decision-making process for the community moving forward, right? We know that we're not going to implement everything exactly as it's rendered there, but the information exists so that they can make decisions about what to prioritize, what projects to move forward.
I think one of the biggest valuable things that comes out of this is even just getting the discussion going. If you're not talking about it, it's not something that people are thinking about. And so that really what it gave me as an opportunity as a leader is to be able to get people in the room to start having the conversations so that, we could even look at it in different ways, but then also this decision side of it, that is absolute key because people don't want to just make something up. They want to make a yes or no decision based off of what they know. And they don't know much about it, to be honest, until the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Community Students provided that.
Right.
There's only one other thing I would point out about the slides that we just shared, and another student who is super creative and working on her Master's of Urban Regional Planning actually went and took photographs or obtained photographs of community members to use in the rendering. So they could actually see themselves in those places, not just some random clip art. So they were pictures of real Keokuk residents used in the renderings to help them imagine what the space could look and feel like.
Right, and I think that it's a very powerful tool, right? The renderings I made, right? Because it kind of showcased the community. Hey, this is what the streets could look like. This is what we could do. And I think when you do that, you get more feedback from them. You know what? I don't like this bike lane. I don't like this greenways. I don't know. I think you can. It's better to show than to just tell. Hey, we could do this and we could do that. Well, actually, look at this. What do you think of that? Yeah.
Also, I wanted to just mention like the aspect from a community partner and having students come in. I was just recently a student 8 years ago. I think about it now, gosh, it was forever ago, but also I work with other students. I've had interns come in, I've had graduate students because of my connection with Iowa State University Extension Outreach. But like, I explain to people like, these are, and they see you all out in the community and I'm like, these are adults, like these are people that are, they're getting their masters and some of them are undergraduates too, but I'm like, this is an opportunity for them to take a real world experience and understand what it's like. Because to be honest, I think when you're a student, you're like, oh, there's the theory, there's the things that you're taught. But then when you get into the actual real experience of putting together a public meeting and you have 5 people show up and you're like, darn it, I'm like, yeah, win. You know? So it's it's sometimes that reality side of it. And like, and it's the aspect of like, that's why we do several ways of outreach. You know, we don't just only go to the football game. We also have a public meeting in the library with Nadia and with pencils and people writing all over maps. And I think that also, it was fun for the community participants to talk to somebody from outside of Keokuk about what they loved about Keokuk, what they thought of Keokuk, like, and having somebody care. It was awesome. And I think the students just add so much to that compared to like a consultant. You know, the students, it's like, they're fun, they're learning, they're enjoying themselves. I just think that is, because we could have hired a consultant, they could have done all this work for 10 times as much, but it wouldn't have been the same experience for the community. And it wouldn't have been the same outcomes either, I don't believe.
It's interesting to hear you. Oh, I'm so sorry, Molly. Go ahead.
It's okay.
Go
No,
ahead.
I was actually to that end, Nadia, I was going to ask you about your experiences with IISC and the Keokuk community. Was there anything in the process that you didn't expect? Like, what were some of the biggest like learning experiences for you?
God, it's interesting because I was really going to touch on that. I didn't expect the community to be that engaged in the project. But personally, for me, I was like, okay, I'm gonna deal with this. This was my mindset. This is the client, and I'm gonna do everything that I can in order to provide to the client the best project that I can, the best product, right? And I think I'm not off to say that the entire group had that mindset. I wasn't seeing myself as a student. It was like, hey, I'm in the workforce. I'm doing something for a client, so I have to provide the best final product, right? I have to wow the client. I have to show something that they go, yes, this is what we are implementing. And I didn't expect them to be all in there. One of the public engagements that Shelley was mentioning, there were maps and crayons and all that, and everybody was drawing. We went really old school, and everyone was a part of that, the developing of the network plan, and that made the entire project even more interesting. It wasn't just us doing an academic work, which we ended up doing, yes, but it was more than that, right? This is gonna sound bad, but I felt really mature, right? I was working towards something that was big, and I'm not saying I'm childish. This is not where I'm going with. Just I was really working with a community that was engaged in what we were doing. Like Shelley said, that weren't seen as just as students, like they were working with us. It was an amazing experience. Words don't suffice, really. Yeah.
And somebody who does this community work, that stuff is the stuff that people like. To be honest, I get markers out all the time. I have markers all over. Like, I mean, I'm not like, but I'm saying is that people don't want to sit in a stuffy meeting. They want to be engaged. They want you to sit down and talk to them about it. They want you to be, and I hope that you learned that from this experience, is that those are the things that bring a lot of value, because it's about the relationship building. It's about the conversations. It's about creating the feeling of trust, and that you're here to help, you know, you're here to do what we want to do, not just what you want to do. Those are the things that I think that's what you guys, I think that's something actually that is the most undervalued part of the work that planners do, is that, right, you know, you guys know what you want to do in a certain aspect because of what you've learned, but it's about actually the community taking that and then helping the community see what that's going to look like, as you said with the picture. Yeah. So I'll be done.
Exactly.
So that also begs the question, Shelley, do you think, like, you touched on some of the outcomes of these projects in the community and where you're at now with, you know, trying to get some of these projects done. Would you say that like community relations and community morale have improved from these projects as well? Is that like an intangible outcome or benefit?
So to be very honest, it was with COVID sort of happening right at the end. I was so excited about all of the stuff, and it sort of put a wrench in everything, to be very honest. It was like, we call it the year of pause. Like, so what do we do? And we just sort of paused for a year. And then we started pulling back together, and I pulled together our community partners, our COG, our city planner, some of our city, key sort of the core group, to say, okay, so how do we identify the things we want to move forward with? And so, to be honest, we applied for some grants. We got some grants using this foundational work. And so from the people that are doing the work, it's been really helpful. To be honest, where I feel that the thing that we missed because of COVID and that we have to regroup right now is to be able to go out and share with the public all of the great things that have happened. So we have our annual meeting tonight, and this is part of the talking points in the annual meeting, is to talk about these projects and to say, we never had the opportunity to celebrate this. And we really need to actually just have one meeting, like not one meeting, but one event to share all of these great things so people can see it and know it. And so that, I feel like right now we're getting, the people that are doing the work have gotten so much momentum going, and it's awesome. That community side of it, because of just the last 2 years being strange, has been something that we need to take the time and cultivate that again and build that energy again. So, because that's, I think, was something that I was super excited for, was that.
Yeah.
No,
I really appreciate your candor. It's been a really rough couple of years for everybody, even folks like me who are involved in comms and engagement. We've had to be really creative doing online engagement. So, but I have tremendous faith that you'll be able to get out there and rally morale again, because you have accomplished so much in your community with these projects already. So that's really exciting. I guess we are getting fairly close. I have two more questions. For Jerry, as a faculty member, could you also share about the outcomes that you're really proud of for some of the projects here?
So one of them is several outcomes that I'm proud of. One of them is this: when students get to this project, when they start this project, initially there is a sense of anxiety. Can we actually do a product? Can we do something like this? And then to see that transform into, I'm a professional here, I can do something like Nadia was describing, that's fantastic. To see that is fantastic. Then second, for students to experience that sense of agency, as students they can do something, they can make change, right? For them to experience that is fine. To see that is fantastic, because that provides them a really good launch pad to their career. As professionals, they're empowered to actually do things about communities. But once they experience that sense of agency right in school, before they finish, they are even bigger agents of change once they get out into the professional world. At a community level, projects like this, they bring the community back together. They reignite the community, so to speak, make reconnections happen. So that's great. In the short term, that happens. And often this continues for a long time, but in the long term, these projects can attract funding, and that funding can lead to buildings, and the buildings can revive the place. And that's amazing. That's amazing to see that. It doesn't happen in 1 year or 2 years. It happens over maybe 7 or 8 years, sometimes 10 years. And to go back 10 years, I'd love to go back to Keokuk in 2030 and then track the trajectory of some things that have happened in the last 10 years, from 2020 to 2030, and see how the project, how the work that Nadia did in trails, and how the work that others did in the housing project, how that influenced or impacted the outcomes. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm sure there will be many. I'm looking forward to that. So it was overall a very, very satisfying thing. The other small trivial thing, maybe a trivia kind of thing that I really liked about this project is often students love the project, they love the people that they're working with, and often they fall in love with the city or the place that they're working in. In this particular group, on the housing group, the majority of the students, if they could move to Keokuk after they did this project, they would have done that. They absolutely fell in love with the place. So that was amazing.
Spectacular.
We have openings.
Fabulous. Oh, thank you so much, Jerry and Shelley as well. I guess to wrap up, Travis, is there anything else you want to highlight, and how can our participants and viewers get involved in similar initiative? How do they follow up?
I have to unmute first before I answer that question. Yeah, so to follow up, I mean, to follow up with for the communities that happen to be watching this, if they're in Iowa, you can just send me an email, right? If you're interested in doing this type of stuff. But I think there's a broader audience, and I think hopefully that something that viewers of this take away is that there's a lot of really kind of special work that happens when you can collaborate with, when you can bring together communities and educational institutions and faculty and students, and not even stop there. You can bring together the COGS, and that's the type of stuff that we do, is we try to bring a lot of people to the table. And so the other thing that I want to highlight is that EPIC-N as an organization as well provides the tools and resources to kind of launch this type of work happening. So nobody has to recreate the wheel. That programs like IISC exist, and where we share information. EPIC-N gathers this information and brings people together. So for a community can reach out to EPIC-N, a university can reach out to EPIC-N, and if they don't have something like this in place, then there's no there's not a major barrier. Their resources exist for them to move forward. And Marshall is there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for answering my questions related to outcomes, everyone. I really appreciate it.
It's been such a great call bringing you all together. And I'm so glad that Molly, you were able to be the co-moderator today, because it's been such a great illuminating moment at highlighting what the kind of a side vision of the EPIC network is, this like network of people in all different settings, in all different jurisdiction levels, working together to make projects that build resilience and sustainability happen in a meaningful way. And so thank you for your time and your effort in being in this recording, everyone. I really appreciate it. I really want to say thank you to them. If you're watching this recording, we'll make sure to put a lot of different social media links and contact links in the description of this video, so you can thank them for their time publicly and also find more information about their work. But I again just want to say thank you all again, and I'm going to go ahead and close out the recording. If you'd like to ask questions following this event, again, you can find us at epicn.org, or you can use the contact information for the participants that will be shared.
Thank you so much, Marshall and team, and Jules. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's nice seeing you all.